Story number 1. The Boy in the Motel Mirror. I never believed in ghosts. I always figured people mistook shadows for figures, wind for whispers, their own paranoia for something supernatural. That was before I checked into a roadside motel just outside Tulsa, Oklahoma, and saw something I still can't explain. I was driving cross-country for work, heading to a client meeting in Arizona. I preferred driving to flying. Something about the open road, the silence, the ability to think without distractions. That night, I was exhausted. My eyes burned from staring at the road for too long. My back ached from the stiff driver's seat, and I needed a place to rest before I started hallucinating from sleep deprivation. I spotted a flickering neon sign off the highway, Redwood Inn, vacancy. It wasn't anything special, just another worn-out motel with a faded exterior and a parking lot that smelled like gasoline. The man at the front desk barely looked up when I walked in. He was old, gray-bearded, with a cigarette dangling from his lips. The place reeked of stale smoke and something sour. Just one night, I told him, sliding my credit card over the counter. He ran it through, then hesitated before handing me the key. Room 108, he said. His fingers lingered for a second too long, and his eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place, like he wanted to say something but changed his mind. I was too tired to care. Room 108 was at the far end of the motel, right next to the vending machines. The air was damp, and the carpet smelled like mildew. The room itself was what you'd expect from a place like this. Cheap, floral bedspread, flickering lamp, a boxy TV that probably hadn't worked in years. I locked the door, tossed my bag on the chair, and went straight to the bathroom to splash water on my face. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought my reflection was off, like the glass was old and warped. But then I realized it wasn't my reflection I was looking at. A boy, no older than 10, stood inside the mirror, staring at me. My heart slammed against my ribs. The boy had short, dark hair, pale skin, and eyes that seemed too large for his face. He wore a faded blue t-shirt and jeans. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there watching me. My first thought was that someone was behind me. I spun around so fast I nearly slipped, but there was no one. The bathroom was empty. I turned back to the mirror. The boy was still there. I backed out of the bathroom, keeping my eyes on the mirror. The moment I crossed the threshold into the bedroom, he vanished. I stood there, my breath shallow, my pulse hammering in my ears. You're exhausted. Your mind is playing tricks on you. That's what I told myself. I've been driving for almost 10 hours straight. Maybe I'd fallen asleep at the wheel without realizing it. Maybe I was dreaming. I sat on the bed, forcing myself to breathe. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of the vending machines outside. The air felt heavier than before, pressing against my chest, like something unseen was watching me. But I refused to let myself fall into that paranoia. I didn't go back into the bathroom. I didn't even turn off the lights. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to force sleep to take me. At some point, I must have dozed off. A knock woke me up. It was soft, rhythmic, tap, tap, tap. I groggily sat up, my heart still heavy with sleep. My eyes flicked to the clock on the nightstand. 3:12 a.m. The knocking came again, not from the door, from the bathroom. A cold wave rolled through my body. My skin prickled. I knew I had locked the door. I knew no one else was inside. But the sound continued, quiet but insistent. I slowly stood, my breath shallow. Every step toward the bathroom felt heavier than the last. The air smelled different now, damp, like old wood after a storm. I placed my hand on the door and hesitated. I didn't want to open it. Every fiber of my being screamed for me to turn around and leave the room, but I had to see. I pushed the door open. The boy was there, standing just inside the mirror, but he wasn't alone this time. Behind him in the reflection was something else, something tall, black-eyed, and wrong. It loomed behind the boy, its face half hidden in the shadows, its mouth stretched too wide, teeth too sharp. Its fingers, long and skeletal, rested on the boy's shoulders. The boy's lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. His eyes, wide with something I could only describe as pleading, locked onto mine. And then the lights went out. The room plunged into darkness. The hum of the vending machines outside stopped. The air became suffocating, thick like water pressing against my skin. A whisper brushed against my ear. "Help me." I stumbled back, heart pounding, slamming into the nightstand. The lamp toppled to the floor with a crash. I scrambled for my phone, for anything, but the darkness was suffocating. And then, silence. A beat passed. Then, the lights flickered back on. The bathroom mirror was empty. I grabbed my keys and my bag and bolted from the room, my pulse a wild drumbeat in my ears. As I passed the front desk, the old man barely glanced up. "You saw him, didn't you?" he muttered. I froze. "What?" "The boy in the mirror." He exhaled smoke, shaking his head. "You're not the first." I gripped my bag tighter. "What the hell is he?" The old man's gaze was heavy, tired. "Nobody knows. People say he's looking for someone to take his place." A shiver ran down my spine. "What happens to the people who stay?" The man's expression darkened. He didn't answer. I didn't ask again. I just left. I drove until the motel was nothing but a memory in my rearview mirror. But even now, I still see him sometimes. Not in my dreams, not in my thoughts, but in my reflection, standing behind me, waiting. Story number 2, The Whispers from the Well. I never liked moving, but when my husband and I found a beautiful old house in rural Georgia with a big backyard for our daughter, Lily, it felt like the right decision. The house had charm, white shutters, a wraparound porch, and a backyard that stretched into the woods. It was the kind of place where memories were supposed to be made, but some places hold memories of their own. Some things never leave. Lily was 5 when we moved in. She had always been a quiet child, content with playing alone, making up stories, and singing to herself. So when she started spending hours in the backyard, talking softly to something, I assumed she was just being a kid. I figured she was pretending, maybe talking to an imaginary friend. At first I found it sweet. She'd sit on the grass, facing the old stone well that sat near the back fence, her tiny hands tracing patterns in the dirt. The well was ancient, covered in moss and half hidden behind overgrown weeds. The realtor had mentioned it, but assured us it had been sealed years ago, just a remnant of the past. One evening, as I was bringing her inside for dinner, I heard her whisper, "I can't stay." "Mommy's calling me." It sent a small shiver through me. I hadn't heard her talking that quietly before. When I asked her who she was speaking to, she only smiled. "My friend," she said. I didn't think much of it. Kids have wild imaginations. A week later, I noticed something strange. Every time I called Lily inside, she would glance at the well before obeying, almost like she was waiting for permission. One night, As I was tucking her into bed, I asked, "Who's your friend, sweetie?" She pulled the blanket up to her chin. "She's a girl like me." I smiled. "What's her name?" Lily hesitated, then whispered, "She doesn't remember." That gave me pause. "Where does she live?" "In the well," she said matter-of-factly. A sharp chill ran down my spine. "That's just pretend, right?" Lily blinked up at me, confused. "No, Mommy. She talks to me." I forced a laugh. "What does she say?" Lily yawned, already drifting into sleep. "She says she's lonely." That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I kept telling myself it was just a game, but something about it gnawed at me. The next afternoon, while Lily napped, I went outside to check the well. I hadn't really looked at it since we moved in. The stones were crumbling, and the wooden cover was warped with age. I peered inside, expecting nothing but darkness. But something moved. It was faint, like the shift of a shadow. My breath caught. I told myself it was my own reflection, my own paranoia. But then I heard it, a whisper, so soft I almost convinced myself I imagined it. "Help me." I stumbled back, heart hammering. It had to be the wind, just the wind. That evening, I told my husband Mark about it. He laughed it off. "It's probably just some weird echo," he said, "or maybe the well isn't as sealed as they claimed." That made sense. Rational, logical. I clung to that. But Lily's behavior got stranger. She started waking up in the middle of the night, standing by her window, staring into the backyard. When I asked her why, she said, "She's crying." "What do you mean?" Lily looked at me with those big, innocent eyes. "She says she's stuck." I checked the well the next morning. This time, I brought a flashlight. When I shined it down, all I saw were damp, moss-covered stones. But as I turned to leave, I heard it again. A giggle, soft, distant, echoing up from the darkness. I ran inside, slammed the door, and locked it. That night, Lily woke up screaming. I ran to her room, my heart in my throat. She was sitting up in bed, sobbing, her hands clenched into fists. I held her close. "What happened, baby?" "She's mad," she whimpered. "She doesn't want me to leave. She says she wants me to stay with her." Mark was up now, rubbing his eyes. "This is getting ridiculous," he muttered. He scooped Lily up and held her close. "It's just a dream, sweetheart." But I wasn't convinced. I spent the next day researching. The house was old, built in the early 1900s. I found an old newspaper article from 1947 about a little girl who went missing. Her name was Eleanor. She was last seen playing near the well. I couldn't breathe. My stomach churned as I read through the details. The search lasted weeks, but no body was ever found. Some believed she had fallen in. Others whispered that something else had taken her. That evening, as I tucked Lily into bed, I asked, "Does your friend have a name now?" Lily hesitated. "She remembers." I swallowed hard. "What is it?" Lily's voice was barely a whisper. "Eleanor." I barely slept that night. I kept the hallway light on, listening for any sound. Around 3 a.m., I heard the bedroom door creak open. I sat up, my pulse roaring in my ears. Lily stood in the doorway, but she wasn't alone. A shadow lingered behind her, just out of the light. My breath caught as Lily took a slow step forward. "She says I can go with her now," she murmured. I lunged from the bed, grabbing her and slamming the door. I locked it, my hands shaking. Behind me, Mark jolted awake. "What the hell?" I couldn't speak. I just held Lily, whispering over and over, You're safe. You're safe. The next morning, we packed our bags. I didn't care about breaking our lease. I didn't care about losing money. We left, and I never looked back. A month later, curiosity got the better of me. I searched for another article, something, anything. What I found made my blood run cold. The well had been sealed off in the 1950s because 2 other children had fallen in. Neither survived. One of them was named Eleanor. I shut my laptop and never searched again. Some places hold memories. Some things never leave. And some whispers should never be answered. Story number 3. The woman in the drain. I moved to Los Angeles for a fresh start, to finally be myself, without judgment, without the weight of my past pressing down on me. It wasn't easy being a transgender woman in a small town where everyone knew my dead name, where whispers followed me down grocery store aisles. LA was supposed to be different. It was supposed to be freedom. I found an apartment in an old building just outside of downtown, nothing fancy, but it was mine. The pipes creaked and the floorboards groaned, but I didn't care. I was here. I was safe. Or so I thought. The first time I heard it, I was brushing my teeth. It was late, around midnight. I had just finished a long shift at the cafe and was rinsing my mouth when I heard the whisper. Soft, distant, like a breath slipping through the drain. Come back. I froze, toothbrush halfway to the sink. The words were faint, almost drowned out by the hum of the old pipes. I leaned down, peering into the drain, my reflection distorted in the water pooled around the rusted edges. Nothing. I shook it off. Old buildings made weird noises. The pipes were probably just settling, that's what I told myself. But the next night, it happened again. I was in the shower, the hot water washing away the exhaustion of another long shift, when I heard it. A whisper, curling up from the drain, threading through the steam. Why did you leave? The words slithered up my spine, cold despite the heat of the water. I turned off the shower and listened. The apartment was silent except for the slow drip of water down the drain. I convinced myself it was nothing. Just exhaustion. Just my imagination. Until the voice said my dead name. I hadn't heard it in months. I had stripped it from my life, erased it from paperwork, from my thoughts. But there it was, curling up from the drain, soft and sickly sweet. I stumbled back, slipping on the wet tiles, my breath coming fast and uneven. This wasn't just old pipes. This wasn't my mind playing tricks on me. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt something watching me. The next morning, I avoided the bathroom entirely. I brushed my teeth in the kitchen sink, washed my face with a bottle of water. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I was letting some stupid old plumbing freak me out. But the voice didn't stop. Over the next few days, it became more frequent, more insistent. The drain would whisper when I was brushing my hair, getting dressed, even just walking past the bathroom. Always my dead name. Always her voice. The voice of my mother. She had never accepted me, never even tried. When I finally told her the truth, she looked at me like I was a stranger, like I had already died. I hadn't spoken to her since. One night, I forced myself to confront it. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring down into the drain, the metal rusted and stained with years of neglect. "I'm not coming back," I whispered. For a moment, there was silence. Then a slow, wet gurgle bubbled up from the drain, a choking sound, like something struggling to breathe. Then I'll bring you back. The lights flickered. The air turned damp, heavy. I stumbled out of the bathroom, slamming the door behind me. The whispers turned to knocking. Soft, at first, then harder, rattling the door in its frame. I pressed my hands over my ears, but I could still hear her. You were never supposed to leave. The knocking stopped. The apartment fell silent. I stayed awake until the sun came up. By morning, I had made a decision. I was leaving. I didn't care if I had to break my lease, lose my deposit. I wasn't staying another night. I stuffed my things into bags, barely thinking, barely breathing. When I reached the bathroom, I hesitated. The drain was silent. Still. The air no longer felt heavy. Maybe it was over. Maybe whatever had latched onto me had finally let go. I bent down and reached for my toothbrush. A hand shot out of the drain. Wet, gray fingers latched onto my wrist, yanking me forward. I screamed, my body slamming against the edge of the sink. My reflection in the mirror twisted, distorting into something wrong. Something with my face, but hollow, empty. Water surged up from the drain, black and thick, spilling onto the floor. A shape rose with it, something pale and bloated, hair slicked to its skull, eyes like empty sockets. Come back. I wrenched my arm free and bolted. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I didn't breathe until I was outside, standing in the middle of the street, shaken. I never went back. I left everything behind. My clothes, my furniture, even my wallet. I didn't care. I found a new apartment, a new start. But sometimes, when the water runs too long, I still hear it. A whisper curling up from the drain, calling me home. Story number 4, the night shift haunting. The hospital was never quiet at night. People think the night shift is peaceful, but that's a lie. There's always a distant murmur, machines beeping, feet shuffling, whispers behind closed doors. Some of those whispers belong to the living. Others, I'm not so sure. I had been working nights at St. Mary's for 6 months. It wasn't my first hospital job, but it was the first place that ever made my skin crawl. It wasn't just the usual unease that came with being surrounded by death and sickness. There was something else, something wrong, lurking in the spaces where the fluorescent lights flickered and the air felt just a little too still. It started with room 312. I first noticed it on a Tuesday night around 3 a.m., the witching hour, they call it. I was making my rounds, checking charts, adjusting IVs, trying to stay awake. Room 312 was at the end of the hall, next to a window that overlooked the parking lot. It had been empty for 2 weeks, but when I passed by, I saw movement inside. A child, a little girl, maybe 6 or 7, sitting cross-legged on the hospital bed, her dark hair falling over her face. My stomach dropped. No child should have been there. I stepped inside. "Sweetheart, are you lost?" She didn't answer. Her head tilted slightly, but she didn't look at me. Her hands rested on her knees, palms up, as if she were waiting for something. I reached for my radio to call security, but before I could press the button, she spoke. "They don't like when you see them." A cold prickle ran down my spine. "Who?" She lifted her head, finally meeting my eyes. Her pupils were too large, swallowing the brown of her irises. Them. The air seemed to shift, thickening around me like water. The lights above flickered once, twice, then buzzed out. The room was plunged into near darkness, the only illumination coming from the hallway behind me. I turned toward the door, my heart hammering. A shadow moved in the hall. Tall, unnaturally thin. It didn't walk. It glided, its form shifting with the dim light, almost like smoke. The girl giggled, but it was wrong, like it was layered. Multiple voices tangled together. I spun back around, but she was gone. The bed was empty, the sheets undisturbed. A cold sweat coated my skin as I backed out of the room. The shadow was gone too. The hallway was empty. I told myself I was overtired, that my brain was playing tricks on me. But I started paying attention after that night. I started noticing the patterns. Every night at 3:12 a.m., room 312's call light would blink. It didn't matter if the room was empty or occupied. No one was ever in distress. No one ever pressed the button. The security footage never showed anything. A month later, a new patient was admitted to 312, a woman in her 60s recovering from surgery. She was stable, recovering well, but on my third night with her, I found her standing by the window, her IV still attached, her breathing shallow. Miss Henderson, I said gently, you shouldn't be up. Let's get you back to bed. She didn't respond. Her gaze was locked outside, staring into the parking lot. I stepped closer and placed a hand on her shoulder. Her skin was ice cold. That's when I heard it. A whisper, low, urgent, coming from the corner of the room. Turn around. I froze. My pulse pounded in my ears. Slowly, against every survival instinct, I turned my head. The little girl was standing in the corner, her hands at her sides, her expression blank. And behind her, a shape shifting in the darkness, tall, watching. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The light flickered again, and suddenly the room was normal. The girl was gone. Miss Henderson blinked, looking around dazed. Oh, I must have dozed off, she mumbled. She didn't remember getting up. The next morning she was dead. No one could explain it. She had been fine, healthy, no complications. But at exactly 3:12 a.m., her heart had simply stopped. I filed an incident report, but no one took it seriously. They wrote it off as an unexpected complication. That was when I started asking questions. Some of the older nurses avoided my gaze when I mentioned room 312. One finally gave me a name, Emily Carter. She had been a patient at St. Mary's back in the 1970s. She was 7 years old. She had come in for a routine surgery. She never left. The official report said there had been a mistake with the anesthesia, a tragic accident, but rumors spread, whispers about how she had woken up during the operation, how she had been aware but unable to move, trapped in her own body as the doctors cut into her. No one knew if it was true, but after she died, strange things started happening in room 312. Lights flickering, equipment failing, patients reporting a little girl standing at the foot of their beds. Most of them didn't survive. I tried to tell myself it was just an old ghost story, but then one night I was working alone, 3:12 a.m. The call light for room 312 blinked. I stared at it from across the hall, my stomach twisting. Slowly, I stepped toward the door, my breath shallow. The room was dark, silent. I forced myself inside. The bed was empty, but the sheets were rumpled, like someone had just gotten up. The window was open, curtains fluttering against the night air. I turned to leave, but I heard it. A soft, wet gurgle, a gasp, like someone struggling to breathe. I spun around, my heart in my throat. The hospital bed was shaking, the mattress indenting as if something unseen was crawling across it. Then the whisper came, soft and childlike, but layered beneath it. Something else, something deeper. I don't want to be alone anymore. The door slammed shut. behind me. I ran. That was my last shift at St. Mary's. I quit the next day. No explanation, no notice. I packed my things and left town. But sometimes, late at night when I'm in bed, I hear the sound of a K call light blinking. And I know she's still waiting. Story number 5. Grandpa's room stayed locked for a reason. When Grandpa died, no one wanted the house. It had been in our family for generations, a creaking old thing that sat on a quiet road just outside of town. My father and uncles had all moved away years ago, leaving Grandpa to his solitude. He had never seemed to mind. In fact, he preferred it that way. I was the only one who still had fond memories of the house. Summers spent running through the backyard, the scent of pipe smoke, clinging to the porch. The way Grandpa always had a twinkle in his eye when he told his stories. So when no one else wanted it, I volunteered to move in. I had just gone through a messy breakup, and the idea of starting fresh in a familiar place seemed like a blessing. The house was just as I remembered, mostly dusty, sure, and in need of some work, but the bones were good. As I walked through, I felt like a kid again, tracing my fingers over the old wallpaper, inhaling the musty scent of books and aged wood. Then I reached his room. It was locked. That wasn't unusual. Grandpa had always kept it that way. No one was allowed in. Not my father when he was a boy, not me when I visited. Whenever I had asked, Grandpa would shake his head and say, "Some doors stay closed for a reason." I had always assumed it was just storage, maybe a mess he didn't want anyone to see. But now, standing in front of it, the doorknob, ice cold under my fingers, I felt something I hadn't expected. Dread. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was just a room. I would open it eventually, clean it out, turn it into an office or something. But that night, I dreamed of Grandpa. He was standing in the doorway of his room, just as I had seen him so many times before. But his eyes weren't twinkling. They were dark, sunken. His face was pale, drawn tight over sharp cheekbones. He opened his mouth to speak, but all that came out was a whisper, carried on a breath that smelled of earth and rot. "Don't." I woke up gasping. For the next few days, I tried to ignore the room. I focused on cleaning, fixing the leaky pipes, repainting the living room. But the locked door was always there, lingering in the corner of my mind, like an itch I couldn't scratch. And then the noises started. It began with soft scratching. At first I thought it was mice, but then I realized it wasn't coming from the floor or the walls. It was coming from inside Grandpa's room. I told myself the house was settling, that it was old and creaky. But then I heard something else. A thump, low and heavy, like something had fallen inside. I stood in the hallway staring at the door, my pulse thudding in my ears. I knocked. Silence. I knocked again, harder. The doorknob rattled. I stumbled back, heart hammering. Number, that wasn't possible. No one had been in there for years. I called my father the next day. "What's in Grandpa's room?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. There was a long silence on the other end. Then finally, he sighed. "I don't know," he admitted. "He never let any of us in, not even Mom." "Didn't you ever ask?" "Of course, but he would get angry, really angry." I stopped asking after a while. That night, I dreamed of the door. I was standing in front of it, but this time it was open. The room beyond was pitch black. I couldn't see the walls, the floor, just endless darkness stretching out before me. Then something moved, A shape, shifting just beyond the threshold. A shadow with too many limbs, too many eyes. It crawled toward me, slow and deliberate. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. And then I heard Grandpa's voice, whispering in my ear, "You should have left it alone." I woke up drenched in sweat. That morning I made a decision. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to see. I searched the house for the key, checking drawers, cabinets, even under the old rugs. I finally found it tucked inside Grandpa's bedside table, wrapped in a handkerchief covered in dried blood. I almost dropped it. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to throw the key away, to walk out of that house and never come back. But I didn't. I walked to the door, key clutched in my trembling fingers. I slid it into the lock. It turned too easily. The door creaked open. The air inside was heavy, damp, suffocating. The room was wrong. The ceiling was too high. The walls stretched in a way that didn't make sense, like the space was bending, warping. The bed was still made, covered in dust. An old dresser sat against the far wall, its mirror clouded over. But what made me stop, what made my stomach drop to my feet, was the chair in the middle of the room, and the thing sitting in it. It looked like Grandpa, or at least what used to be him, but his skin was gray, stretched too tight over sharp bones. His lips were curled back, frozen in a silent snarl. His eyes were wide open, and he was still breathing. I choked on a scream, stumbling back, my whole body shaking. The thing in the chair twitched. Then its head snapped toward me. I slammed the door and locked it, my fingers fumbling, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. And then came the knocking. Slow, rhythmic. Then the whisper. "You shouldn't have opened the door." I ran. I don't remember grabbing my keys, don't remember getting in my car. I just drove. I didn't stop until I reached a motel 2 towns over, shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I called my dad, told him everything. The next morning he went to the house, called me an hour later. "There's nothing in that room," he said. "Nothing at all. Just old furniture and dust." But I know what I saw. I never went back. I sold the house to a developer, told them to do whatever they wanted with it. Sometimes, though, I dream of Grandpa. Not how I remember him, not how he used to be. He's always sitting in that chair, eyes wide, lips curled back, whispering to me. Some doors stay closed for a reason. Story number 6. The man who dug too deep. I never believed in curses, but I do now. I learned the hard way that some things should stay buried. Some things were never meant to be uncovered. I was working a construction job in upstate New York, restoring the foundation of an old church that had stood abandoned for decades. It was a simple project. Reinforce the structure, clear the overgrowth, lay the groundwork for a historical preservation effort. Nothing special, nothing dangerous. At least that's what I thought. The church sat on a hill, surrounded by thick woods. The place had an unsettling silence to it. No birds, no rustling leaves, just this heavy stillness, like the earth itself was holding its breath. The locals didn't like talking about it. Whenever I asked about the history, they'd shrug, change the subject, or tell me to be careful. The first few weeks were normal. Hard labor, long hours, nothing unusual. But then we started digging. We were supposed to reinforce the foundation, clear out the old stonework, make sure the structure didn't collapse on itself. The digging started slow, just a few feet down, but the deeper we went, the stranger things became. The first thing we found was the bones. At first, we thought they were animal remains, but when one of the guys wiped away the dirt, he froze. It was a human skull. The foreman called the sheriff, and soon a small crew came to investigate. We expected them to rope off the site, start an official excavation, maybe delay the project. But after a few hushed conversations, the sheriff simply told us to fill the hole and move on. I didn't understand it. These were human remains. This was supposed to be a historical site. Why wouldn't they want to investigate? That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I lay in my cot staring at the ceiling of the temporary housing we had on site, listening to the wind push against the old church walls. The unease sat deep in my stomach. By the next morning, the bones were gone. The sheriff must have taken them. That was the only explanation. But no one saw them do it. No one talked about it. It was like they had never been there at all. The digging continued. A few days later, we found something else. About 10 feet down, my shovel hit something hard. Not stone. Something smoother. Something old. I brushed away the dirt and saw symbols carved into the surface. Strange, jagged markings that didn't look like any language I'd ever seen. The edges of the carvings were sharp, almost untouched by time, as if they had been waiting to be found. A deep humming noise rang through my ears, so low I almost mistook it for a headache. My head throbbed, my vision blurred for just a second. Then the foreman yelled for us to stop. I stepped back, wiping the sweat from my face. The stone was huge, buried beneath centuries of dirt. It wasn't part of the church's foundation. It was something else, something older. I wanted to leave it alone. Every part of me was screaming to stop. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. That night, I dreamed of the pit. I was standing at the edge, staring down into the darkness. The carvings stretched endlessly, running deep into the earth. Then I saw the eyes, black, sunken things staring up at me from below. A whisper drifted through the air. Let me out. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. The next morning, I decided to go back alone. I told myself I just wanted another look, just a quick glance before we covered it up for good. I grabbed a flashlight and climbed into the hole. The air was different down there, thicker, harder to breathe. I ran my fingers over the carvings, tracing the sharp edges, feeling something shift under my skin, a strange vibration crawling up my arms. Then the humming started again. This time, it wasn't just in my head. The ground shook beneath me. A deep crack split through the stone, dust rising into the stale air. I stumbled back, barely catching myself. My flashlight flickered. Something moved in the darkness below. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The crack widened, splitting the earth open, revealing a black void beneath the stone. Not empty, not hollow, but waiting. A hand, long fingers, too many joints, skin like withered leather, crawled out from the gap. I scrambled up the dirt wall, my nails clawing at loose soil. The air was suffocating, thick with the scent of rot and something ancient. The humming grew into a roar, a voice without words, vibrating through my skull. As I reached the top, I dared to look back. Something was pulling itself up from the pit. Its head tilted toward me, and even in the dim light, I saw its mouth stretched too wide, filled with teeth that didn't belong to anything human. I ran. I don't remember getting back to my cabin. I don't remember locking the door. But I remember the feeling, Something had woken up. The next morning, the site was shut down. The foreman told us we were moving on to another project. No explanation, no questions allowed. When I went back to where the hole had been, it was filled in, packed tight with fresh soil. No sign of the carvings, no sign of the stone, like it had never existed. I left that job a week later. I couldn't stay, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing staring up at me from the pit. I moved back home, far away from that town, from that church. But sometimes, late at night, when everything is still, I feel it. That low, deep humming in my bones. And I know it's still down there, waiting. Story number 7. Her smile wasn't real. I met her at a bar downtown. It was one of those dimly lit places with red leather booths and cheap whiskey, where the jukebox played old songs nobody really listened to. I wasn't planning to stay long, just a drink or two before heading home. But then she sat down next to me. She was beautiful in an unsettling way, tall, with sleek black hair that fell over one shoulder and eyes so dark they almost looked black. Her dress shimmered under the neon lights, and her smile was wide, almost too wide. She never stopped smiling. "You look like you could use some company," she said, her voice low and smooth. I wasn't looking for company, but something about her made it impossible to say no. I nodded, and she ordered us both drinks. The conversation was easy at first, almost hypnotic. She laughed at my jokes, leaned in just close enough to make my skin prickle, but something felt off. She never blinked. She never broke that smile. I told myself she was just flirty, maybe a little weird. I had met plenty of strange people in bars before, but then she started saying things she shouldn't have known. "You always sit alone," she murmured, tracing the rim of her glass. I frowned. "You've seen me here before?" She tilted her head. "Not here." The way she said it made my stomach tighten. I tried to laugh it off, but she kept talking. "You don't sleep much, do you?" My fingers tensed around my drink. I hadn't mentioned that. She leaned closer, her lips almost brushing my ear. "Do you remember your dream last night?" I pulled back. "What?" Her smile stretched wider. I felt a chill run down my spine. I did remember my dream. It had been strange. Something about a dark room, a door I couldn't open, and a figure standing just outside my vision. I hadn't told anyone. "How did you left it unlocked," she interrupted, tapping her temple with one perfectly manicured nail. "That's how I got in." I laughed, but it came out wrong, too forced. "Okay, good one." She just watched me. Something about her felt wrong, like she was playing a role but didn't fully understand how people were supposed to act. Checked my phone. 1:13 a.m. I needed to leave. I stood up. "It was nice meeting you, but..." She reached out, fingers grazing my wrist. Ice cold. "Don't go yet," she said, still smiling. "We're not done talking." I pulled away. "Yeah, we are." Her expression didn't change, but her head tilted slightly, like a bird watching something small and breakable. I grabbed my coat and walked out, pushing through the crowd, out into the cold night air. My breath came faster than it should have. I told myself I was overreacting. Just a weird girl at a bar. Nothing more. But then I glanced at the window. She was still watching me, her face pressed against the glass, and she was still smiling. I hurried to my car, locking the doors the second I got in. My hands were shaking As I started the engine, I glanced at the bar one last time. She was gone. I drove home, checking my rearview mirror more times than I wanted to admit. My apartment was only 15 minutes away, but the drive felt longer. By the time I pulled into my lot, I felt stupid for being so freaked out. Then I saw her, standing under the street lamp across from my building, smiling. My stomach dropped. There was no way she could have gotten here that fast. No way she could have known where I lived. I didn't move, didn't blink. She took one step forward. I bolted out of the car, sprinting to my apartment, fumbling with my keys. My hands were shaking too hard to get the door open on the first try. By the time I got inside, I slammed it shut and locked every bolt. I pressed my back against the door, trying to catch my breath. My apartment was silent, except for the faint hum of the fridge. I told myself I was safe. Then I heard footsteps, inside, slow, deliberate, coming from my bedroom. I turned my head, my pulse hammering in my ears. The door to my room was open. I always closed it before I left. The footsteps stopped. I reached for the nearest object, a lamp, gripping it like a weapon as I stepped forward. The apartment felt wrong, like the air had thickened. I peered inside my room. She was standing in the dark, her back to me, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. She took a slow step forward and disappeared. Not out the door, not into the closet, just vanished. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. The smiling woman started appearing everywhere. On the subway, across the street from my work, reflected in windows when I turned too fast. She never spoke again, never moved, just smiled. I moved to another city a few months later, thinking maybe if I left, she'd stay behind. She didn't. I still see her sometimes in the reflection of my bathroom mirror, standing just behind me. Story number 8, The Thing in the Tornado Shelter. Kansas storms don't mess around. When the sky turns that sickly green and the air feels thick enough to choke on, you don't wait. You run. I grew up knowing that. I've spent my whole life in Tornado Alley. And I've seen what happens when people hesitate. That's why when the sirens started wailing that night, I didn't waste time. I grabbed my phone, a flashlight, and bolted for the shelter out back. It was an old thing, built by my grandfather. A rusty metal door, half buried in the earth, leading down into a cramped concrete bunker. It smelled like damp earth and stale air, but it was safe, or at least it was supposed to be. The wind howled as I yanked the heavy door open. Dirt and leaves whipped around me, stinging my skin. I climbed down the ladder, pulling the door shut behind me. The moment it slammed shut, the storm's roar became muffled, replaced by the low hum of silence. I turned on my flashlight, sweeping it across the small space. The shelter was just as I'd left it. A metal bench bolted to the wall, an old wooden shelf stacked with dusty cans of food, a radio that probably hadn't worked in years. And then I saw it. In the farthest corner, just beyond the reach of my flashlight's beam, something moved. My breath hitched. I thought maybe it was a rat, maybe some animal had gotten in, but then it shifted again, too big, too human. The beam trembled in my hand as I aimed the light directly at it. There was nothing there. The corner was empty. I swallowed hard. Maybe I was seeing things. Maybe the shadows were playing tricks on me. The air down here was cold, damp, making my skin prickle. I sat on the bench, forcing myself to breathe. The storm would pass soon. I just had to wait. Then, from behind me, I heard it. A slow, dragging breath. I froze. The flashlight flickered. The air shifted, like something was standing right behind me. My body went rigid. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then, tap, tap, tap. Something tapped the back of my neck. I lunged forward, spinning around so fast I nearly tripped over my own feet. The flashlight beam wobbled wildly, bouncing off the walls. No one was there. The shelter was empty. I pressed myself against the far wall, my heart slamming against my ribs. I was losing it. That was the only explanation. I had been in storms before, but never alone, never in the middle of the night like this. The mind plays tricks. It was just my imagination. Then I saw the handprint. It was smeared in the dust on the bench where I'd been sitting. Too long, too thin. The air grew colder. I wasn't alone. Something was in here with me. I grabbed the ladder, my hands shaking as I climbed up, pushing at the heavy metal door. It wouldn't budge. I shoved harder. Nothing. The wind wasn't even that strong anymore. There was no reason the door should be stuck. Then behind me, a whisper. Stay. I spun around, flashlight shaking in my grip. The beam landed on the far corner again. This time, I saw it. A figure, hunched and wrong, its limbs too long, its skin stretched tight over sharp bones. Its face was featureless except for a wide, lipless mouth. It smiled. I slammed against the door, pushing, screaming, my fingernails scraping against the rusted metal. The thing in the corner started moving, not walking, gliding, its body shifting like smoke, jerking forward in unnatural movements. The door burst open. I scrambled out, nearly falling onto the wet grass. The storm had passed. The night was still, too still, as if the world had been holding its breath. I turned back. The shelter door was wide open, but the space inside was dark, too dark. Darker than it should have been, like something was waiting. I never went back down there. I filled it in the next morning, burying whatever had been inside. But sometimes, when the wind howls just right, I hear it. A whisper. You should have stayed, but the space inside was dark. Too dark. Darker than it should have been. Like something was waiting. I never went back down there. I filled it in the next morning, burying whatever had been inside. But sometimes when the wind howls just right, I hear it. A whisper. You should have stayed. Story number 9. 911. What's your emergency? Working as a 911 dispatcher isn't like what you see in the movies. It's not all high-speed chases and dramatic rescues. Most of the time, it's routine. Car accidents, domestic disputes, noise complaints. But every now and then you get a call that sticks with you, a call that makes you question everything you know about reality. That call came in at 2:17 a.m. I was halfway through my night shift, sipping on stale coffee, trying to keep my eyes open. The phone rang, and I answered like I always did. 911, what's your emergency? At first, all I heard was breathing, shallow, uneven, like the caller had been running. Hello? I said again. A voice, small and trembling. He's inside my house. My back straightened. Ma'am, what's your name? The line crackled. Katie, she whispered. Okay, Katie, stay calm. Are you alone in the house? A pause. Then, yes. I motioned for my supervisor, pointing at my screen. He nodded and started tracing the call. Where are you right now? I asked. In my bedroom. Can you lock the door? A sharp inhale. It's already locked. But he's in the hallway. Goosebumps crawled up my arms. Okay, Katie, listen to me. Stay quiet. Don't hang up. Officers are on the way. Another pause. Then, so soft I almost didn't hear it. He's knocking. I heard it too. A faint, rhythmic tap through the speaker. Stay quiet, I whispered, as if she could hear me better that way. The tapping stopped. A long silence, then Katie's breath hitched. He knows I'm in here. My supervisor waved me down, pointing to a screen. His face had gone pale. The call was coming from an address that didn't exist. Katie, I said carefully, where do you live? Another pause, then, I don't know. The hairs on my arms stood on end. What do you mean? You don't know? A soft sob. I don't remember. The tapping came back, harder this time. I had been doing this job for years, but this was different. The panic in her voice, the strange address, the way the line crackled like an old recording. Then, the voice on the other end changed. Not Katie's anymore. Deeper, slower, wrong. She's not yours to save. The line went dead. I stared at the screen. The trace showed a blank space. No coordinates, no address, nothing. Like the call had never happened. My supervisor shook his head. Some kind of glitch, he muttered. But I knew better. I tried calling back. The number didn't exist. The next night, at 2:17 a.m., the call came again. The same voice, the same fear, the same knocking. I never answered. But sometimes when I'm alone at night, I hear it. A faint rhythmic tap, 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 and I wonder if I should have. Story number 10. The babysitter's last call. Babysitting had always been an easy job for me. Parents would go out, kids would fall asleep, and I'd spend the night watching TV or scrolling through my phone until it was time to go home. Nothing ever happened. Nothing was supposed to happen. That night I was watching a little boy named Noah. He was 4. Cute kid, a little shy but well-behaved. His parents were going to a late dinner, wouldn't be back until close to midnight. They left me the usual list, emergency numbers, bedtime instructions, a note about his favorite stuffed animal. It was routine. The house was nice, too big for just 3 people, but cozy in its own way. Noah's room was upstairs down a long hallway that creaked whenever I walked on it. His parents tucked him in before they left, and by 9 p.m., the house was quiet. At 10:30, my phone buzzed. A text from Noah's mom. "Hey, how's everything?" I replied. "All good." "Noah's asleep." "Great. We should be home by 11:45. I went back to watching TV. The house felt too quiet. Big houses were like that. Lots of space for the silence to stretch out. Every now and then the heater clicked on, or the old pipes groaned. But I tried not to let it get to me. Then at 10:42, the baby monitor crackled. I glanced at it. Noah's room was dark, except for the soft glow of his nightlight. At first, I thought he was just moving in his sleep. But then I heard it. Whispering. A low, hushed voice. I sat up. My stomach tightened. Noah's lips were moving, but he wasn't awake. His tiny body lay still, chest rising and falling and slow. Even breaths. I turned up the volume. The whispering became clearer. "He's coming." I felt a cold prickle at the back of my neck. Noah shifted, rolling onto his side. His voice was barely audible now, but I could still make out the words. "Don't open the door." The baby monitor cut to static. I grabbed my phone, my fingers hovering over Noah's mom's contact. But what was I supposed to say? "Hey, your son is talking in his sleep and freaking me out?" I stood up instead. My feet felt too heavy as I climbed the stairs, the wooden steps groaning under my weight. The hallway stretched out in front of me, lined with family photos. The air felt different, like it had thickened, pressing down on me. Noah's door was slightly open. Just a sliver of darkness. between the frame. I pushed it open. He was still asleep, his stuffed bear tucked under his arm. His lips moved slightly, like he was still whispering, but no sound came out. I stepped closer. "Noah?" His eyelids fluttered, then opened all at once. I sucked in a breath. His pupils were blown wide, almost swallowing the blue of his irises. "Noah, buddy." I kept my voice soft. "Are you okay?" He blinked slowly. Then he whispered, "He's in the house." I felt my stomach drop. "What?" Noah's tiny fingers curled around his blanket. His voice came out even softer, barely above a breath. "He's downstairs." The air turned ice cold. I spun around, my pulse hammering. From the hallway, the house looked normal, dimly lit. Quiet, but I could feel it now. Something was wrong. Then from downstairs, the front door clicked open. I ran. My legs moved before my brain could catch up, my body acting on pure instinct. I grabbed Noah and lifted him into my arms, his small body limp with sleep. I barely made it out of the room when I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming up the stairs. I didn't look. I couldn't. I bolted for the master bedroom at the end of the hall, slamming the door shut behind me and locking it. Noah stirred in my arms. "Shh," I whispered, pressing my back against the door. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs, then they stopped. Silence. I held my breath, every muscle in my body tense. Then tap, tap, tap. Someone was knocking right outside the door. My throat went dry. The knocks were soft, too gentle, like whoever was on the other side knew I was scared. I gripped my phone, my fingers shaking as I dialed 911. The line rang once. Then, click. A voice, low and wrong. "You shouldn't have come upstairs." The line went dead. I choked on a breath. My entire body felt like it was sinking. A shadow shifted under the door. Not feet, something longer, stretching. Noah whimpered against my chest. I squeezed my eyes shut. This isn't real. This isn't real. Then the knocking stopped. The house fell silent again. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then I heard it. From the baby monitor, still clutched in my hand, a soft, crackling whisper. "I told you not to open the door." The sound cut out. The next thing I remember is the sound of Noah's parents pulling into the driveway. I don't remember unlocking the door. I don't remember walking downstairs. But when they stepped inside, they found me sitting on the couch, holding Noah, my face pale, my hands ice cold. They asked what happened. I couldn't answer. I quit babysitting after that. I don't know what was in that house that night, but sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I hear it. A soft, rhythmic tap, tap, tap at my bedroom door. Story number 11. The Forgotten Twin. Growing up, I always felt like something was missing. It was a strange feeling, like walking into a room and forgetting why you were there. A hollow space in my mind. An absence I couldn't explain. My parents never talked about it, never hinted at anything being out of the ordinary. But there were moments, small, fleeting moments, where I'd catch my mom staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite place. Sadness, guilt, I never knew. It wasn't until I was packing up old boxes in my parents' attic that I found the first clue. I was home for the summer, helping them clear out decades of storage. Dust coated everything, and the air smelled like mildew and forgotten things. I was rummaging through an old trunk when I found a stack of crumpled drawings, my childhood sketches. Most of them were the usual: stick figures, misshapen animals, messy crayon scrawls. But one of them made my breath catch. It was a drawing of two boys identical, holding hands, smiling. A name was written above each figure. One was mine, the other name was Eli. I stared at it, my chest tightening. I didn't have a brother, I never did. I brought the drawing downstairs, holding it up to my mom. "Who's Eli?" Her face drained of color. She sat down heavily, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter like she needed to steady herself. "You weren't supposed to remember," she whispered. I felt the air shift around me, thick with something unspoken. "What do you mean?" My voice wavered. Dad walked in at that moment, and when he saw the drawing, his face darkened. He grabbed it from my hand, crumpling it. "We don't talk about this." "But why?" My heartbeat pounded in my ears. "Who is he?" They didn't answer. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling back to the drawing, the name, the emptiness. I'd always felt, but never understood. My own parents were hiding something from me. I needed answers. I went back to the attic, searching through boxes, peeling through every forgotten piece of my childhood. And then I found it. An old photo album buried beneath a pile of yellowed newspapers. I flipped through the pages, my fingers trembling. The first few were normal. Baby pictures, birthdays, holidays. Then, halfway through, the photos changed. There were pictures of 2 boys. Me and another child. We were the same age, same face, same clothes. Every memory I thought I had of being alone, every birthday, every Christmas. There he was, standing beside me, Eli. My stomach twisted. I turned the page, my hands cold, and then, suddenly, the photo stopped. The next pages were empty, blank. It was like he had been erased. I barely heard the footsteps behind me. My mom's voice was soft, trembling. "You shouldn't have found that." I turned to her, the photo album clutched in my hands. Why don't I remember? Tears welled in her eyes. She swallowed hard. "Because we made you forget." The air in the attic grew heavy. The walls felt closer. I shook my head. "That doesn't make sense. How?" She stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "You had a twin. Eli was real. But something happened." A sharp chill ran through me. "What happened?" She hesitated, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. "You were 6, she said finally. "You and Eli were inseparable, always playing together, always whispering secrets we couldn't understand. But then you started acting strange. I didn't speak. I couldn't. You'd wake up screaming," she continued. "You'd cry about Eli standing in the corner of your room watching you while you slept." A sick feeling crawled up my spine. She took a shaky breath. But Eli was already dead. The attic tilted. The air pressed down on my chest. "No," I whispered. "That's not possible." She nodded, tears slipping down her face. "He drowned in the lake behind our house. You were there. You saw it happen." My knees buckled. My mind recoiled. "We tried to help you forget," she said. "You wouldn't stop talking about him, saying he wasn't gone, that he still played with you. We thought you were grieving, but it got worse. You stopped sleeping. You told us Eli wanted you to come with him." My hands shook. "That doesn't make sense." "We had to take you to someone," she said, her voice breaking. "A doctor, a specialist. They helped you forget. They told us it was the only way to save you." I couldn't breathe. A memory, a flicker of something long buried, rose to the surface. A cold hand gripping my wrist, dark water closing over my head, a voice whispering, "Don't leave me behind." I gasped, stumbling backward. Then I heard it. A voice, soft, familiar, right behind me. "You remember now." The attic door slammed shut. The light flickered, and in the dusty reflection of the old mirror against the wall, I saw him, standing beside me, smiling. Eli. I don't remember screaming. I don't remember how I got out of that attic. But I remember the last thing he said before the world went dark. You were never supposed to leave me. I left home the next day. But sometimes when I pass a mirror, I see two reflections, and I know Eli is still waiting. If you enjoyed this story and want more spine-chilling tales, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more terrifying content. And don't forget to check out the videos appearing on your screen for more eerie stories that will keep you up at night. Have you ever had a horror experience of your own? Share it in the comments below. We'd love to hear your chilling encounters. Stay safe and sleep with the lights on.